Hi everyone, I'm excited to bring you this video where I'm going to compare and review and wear test for you some of, or I guess all of, e.l.f.'s new putty primers that they have released. So you're probably familiar with the original putty poreless primer that they have. A lot of people say that it is a dupe for some much more expensive primers. And actually on that topic, if you are interested in a video that I did where I compared e.l.f.'s primer to the Tatcha one and to, I think it was 2 other brands, and I did a very in-depth review and comparison of the ingredients because it's surprising what you'll see in terms of what's inside the product versus how much people are charging you for the product, and my overall thoughts on which one was the best for the price. I will link that video in the upper right hand corner. But circling back to what I'm saying, e.l.f. has now released 2 new versions of that putty primer. They have an illuminating one and a mattifying one. So the purpose of this video is that I'm going to take all 3 of those primers, I'm going to compare them for you so that you can make the best choice in terms of which one you would want based on what effect you want and what skin type that you have. And of course, I'll give you just my overall thoughts and a review of each individual primer too, now that I have not only wear tested them, but had them in different combinations and foundations and all that kind of stuff. Of course, if you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button and join us for all of these videos that we've been publishing. Follow Allure Beauty on Instagram. And if you missed the latest video, I've been doing a whole series on new CoverGirl drugstore products. So I will have that playlist for you and I'll link that in the upper right hand corner for you to check out if you haven't seen those videos yet. All right, let's get looking at comparing and reviewing the new e.l.f. putty primers. Before I apply these to my face and put foundation over them, I want to show you the products kind of up close and give you details about them. And I'm also going to swatch them on my arm and try to show you the differences if they're possible to perceive with swatches. So let's jump to that first. So each of these is pretty widely available. I will put, as always, a link in the description box below to where you can find them to purchase online, as well as a link to a cash back system, which is Rakuten. Because if you're online shopping, you may as well get cash back on any order that you put in. Each of them retails for $8, and you can find them, of course, on e.l.f.'s website, Target, Walmart, Ulta, all those kinds of places. You may have a hard time finding them physically in stores. They're available now, and usually it takes anywhere from a few weeks to sometimes a couple months for them to actually physically show up in stores. So let's start with the original poreless putty primer. The claim by e.l.f. says that this skin perfecting poreless putty primer is infused with squalane to help grip makeup for all day wear and help protect skin from moisture loss. It's supposed to have a velvety texture that glides effortlessly over the skin, smoothing over imperfections for a poreless effect. For the Luminous primer, it says this primer delivers a soft, radiant base for your makeup application, infused with hyaluronic acid and collagen to help plump and hydrate the skin. The velvety texture glides effortlessly over the skin, smoothing over imperfections for a poreless effect and the ultimate grip on makeup. So it is true that hyaluronic acid does help to plump up the skin. Collagen applied topically doesn't give your body actually the collagen molecules that are needed to make the skin internally look more plump and youthful, but the hyaluronic acid is a good, potentially effective ingredient. I would debate how much it actually is able to contact the skin, since it's pretty much the last step of your skincare before you start applying makeup, but it's not going to harm your skin, so that's good. And for the matte primer, it says that the Skin Perfecting Putty Primer is infused with kaolin and white charcoal to absorb excess oil for a shine-free finish. The velvety texture glides effortlessly over the skin, smoothing over imperfections for a poreless effect and the ultimate grip on makeup. And it is true that things like kaolin clay and that charcoal do have an absorbing effect on oil. Now, if you compare the ingredients for these 3 primers, there are some minor differences, but for the most part, they consist of the same ingredients in them and just very slight differences that we've kind of already noted. I will note that for the matte primer, when you look at where the kaolin and charcoal powder are on the list, they are towards the end, so there's not a huge amount of it in the product. Sort of similarly for the illuminating primer, the hyaluronic acid is kind of in the middle of the ingredients list. It's in the latter half of the ingredients list. So again, not a huge amount of the hyaluronic acid. I will also note there is a little bit of squalane in there, which is nice too. In all 3 of the primers, there is a good amount of glycerin, which is going to help a little bit with that hydration, making it not super dry. I don't see any squalane in the matte primer, but there is squalane in not only the illuminated primer, but also the original poreless primer. So first a look at the box packaging. I don't have the box for the original anymore because I've had that for months. They are pretty much the same. The only thing that will distinguish them is the slight color difference. So for the luminous one, it's yellow. For the matte one, it's white. And I believe for the original, it's a soft pale pink. So for each primer, you're getting 0.74 ounces or 21 grams. It's a lot of product. This product is cruelty-free and vegan, and the instructions say to allow the primer to set for 30 seconds before applying your foundation. So we will follow those directions. And exact same packaging for all of them. The only difference is the name on the cap. You screw off the top and you have the product inside. So what I actually want to do before I apply these to my face and show you what the distinctions are once you apply foundation, I want to quote unquote swatch these, but it's going to be more for swatching the foundation above or on top of each primer and giving you a side-by-side comparison. You'll see that in the footage in just a minute when I apply it to my face too, but sometimes it's just a lot easier to see it in swatch form up close. So we're going to start with the original first. And I'm going to apply it in a strip here. I'm going to do 2 layers just to make sure I have enough product. We're going to do the luminizing or luminous one next, leaving a gap between this one and the first one. Again, making sure I have enough product on the skin by applying a second layer. And then last is the matte primer. To my naked eye, I can visually see really subtle differences here, but it may not be enough to be picked up on the camera. Okay, for what it's worth, I'm trying to see if you can see any distinctions. Definitely the middle one, you can see a bit of luminosity. The matte one leaves a little bit of a white cast. So don't know if you're going to see anything, but just for the sake of trying to show you, maybe just to show you with finger swatches, the visual difference between the 3. So I'm going to apply foundation to each strip, and I'm going to do them individually. I don't think there's going to be much cross-contamination, but just to be safe, I'll do a strip at a time over each primer. In between, I'll make sure to wipe down the brush before moving on to the next application on the next primer. And I'm going to keep the foundation swatch thinner, hopefully, than the primer swatch, just to make sure I'm not going over into the next strip. Okay, moving on to the luminous one. And lastly, the matte one. Okay, so there are the 3 strips of foundation. Right here is the original. This one is the luminous strip, and this one is the matte strip. I don't know if the camera will be able to pick up the distinctions. When you look up close, there is definitely a difference, a subtle one, but one that's there and you can pick up on. The matte one is the most matte and kind of flat. The middle one does have a luminous shimmer to it, really finely milled and subtle. And then the first one is in between those two. But I don't know if you can see it on the screen. So let's go ahead and turn to face application. All right, now let's go to me applying each of these. And the approach that I kind of used was to compare them all with each other. So the first thing that I did was on the left side of my face, I applied the original Putty Poreless Primer. So I applied all these primers with my fingers. I think that's the easiest way to do it. And I spread them all over the face. And then I let the primer set for, I would say, at least a minute or two before I even think about going in in with applying foundation on top. With the original Putty primer, you use the warmth of your skin to kind of warm up the product and spread it around. It takes a good amount of time to apply this, unlike your conventional primer that usually comes in a tube, which I would say is pretty quick to apply all over the face. Using these in the pot form takes a little longer to make sure you get enough product and spread it all over and cover your face. And I would say it takes more product too, because I have to go back into the pot at least a few times to actually cover just even half my face, let alone my full face. And I would say the effect you get with the original is slightly more mattified, although nothing that's truly matte, and a little bit smoother. And then what I did is I applied the Luminous Putty primer on the right side of my face. These two in comparison to each other feel pretty much the same. I don't think that either of them is any more significantly thin or easier to spread over the skin. So again, I had to go in a few times to make sure I covered the whole half of my face. Now, the Luminous Putty primer does contain throughout it very finely milled shimmer particles. They are golden in color, and you can tell that there is a luminizing effect overall. I would not say that it is glittery at all. You don't see any chunks of glitter. It doesn't look gaudy at all. It is very refined and luminous, and I don't think you're going to be able to notice even that there is shimmer in it. You'll just notice an overall kind of more luminous effect, unless of course you're specifically looking for that and you get real close up to the skin and look for those shimmer particles. The effect is certainly subtle, but it's there. It's not like it is so subtle that you can't really tell the difference. There is a difference to the overall luminosity of the skin with the luminizing primer. The illuminating priming side doesn't seem to minimize the pores quite as much as the original side. So that partly I think is just inherent in something that is more illuminating or has shimmer in it. It's just naturally going to tend to maybe emphasize pores a little bit more because of the shimmer in there. But again, everything that I'm saying here in terms of the differences are very, very slight. And while wearing these two primers on each side over time, I didn't notice any significant difference between the two sides. After I apply foundation, and especially after you've applied color, like to the cheeks with blush and eyeshadow and all that, I don't think most people are going to be able to tell a difference between the two sides. Then next I tested the original Putty primer again on the left side, kind of as like a control almost, and put that all over the face. And then on the right side, I put the matte Putty primer. Now with the matte primer, there is a little bit of a difference in terms of the texture. It doesn't have as easy of a slip to it, so it does take a little more time to spread it over the skin because it does give you a little more resistance. It has a slightly more powdery feel to it, which makes sense because it has mattifying ingredients. And when you just first apply it from your finger to your face, you can see a kind of white cast, but that goes away as soon as you're blending it over the skin. I don't see any noticeable white cast once I have finished applying the primer. And maybe while applying, I could see a slightly powdering mattifying effect. But I have to say that once I'm done putting it on the skin, I truly cannot see a difference between the mattifying side and the original poreless Putty primer side, which really surprised me because there is a little bit of that clay ingredient in there and those couple of mattifying ingredients, but I don't think there's enough in there to give you a significant mattifying effect. Leave me in the comments below and tell me if you can see any sort of difference visibly between the two sides, or if I hadn't told you that there's two different primers on each side, if you'd be able to tell that they're different. Then I, of course, applied the foundation, and again, to note, when I was doing this, in order to control for the possibility of transferring from one side to the other, I applied on one side, one half of the face first, then I cleaned off my brush and then did the other side. But again, once I did that, I really couldn't see a difference in either side. I decided to then put a translucent setting powder on top, see if that made any difference. And at that point, I thought maybe there's the very slightest amount of difference, but it's so slight that I can't even tell if it's just my mind wanting there to be a difference or if you can actually visibly see a difference between the two sides. The strangest thing to me was after I'd been wearing my foundation for several hours, there was no less shiny effect on the side where I had the mattifying primer underneath compared to the original primer. So using the mattifying primer didn't keep my shininess or oiliness at bay any longer than the other side. In fact, after several hours of wearing, when I really looked up close, if anything, the side with the original primer seemed ever so slightly less oily looking than the side with the matte primer. So on this particular point, the best is that there's no difference between the two of them when it comes to combating the shine. So my thought is, at the end of the day, if you have the original putty primer, you probably don't need the mattifying one because I don't think you're going to get a significant mattifying effect. Now, if you have the original and you want a little bit more luminosity, then I think that especially at the low price of $8 for the amount of product you get, you're not going to be mad at buying the illuminating primer unless you are looking for a super glowy JLo effect, and this illuminating primer is not going to give you that. I'll finish up this video with some thoughts overall about these primers in general as opposed to comparing them to each other. All of these primers have a very interesting kind of grippy effect on your foundation. They have this slight waterproofing effect for the foundation that you put on top. If you were to use your regular foundation on one side and then any of these primers underneath your foundation, the same foundation on the other side, and you went to wash your face off, you will notice the side that had the primer on it, the foundation is almost kind of water phobic. It takes more cleanser to remove the side where you've had this primer on. So I think that was very interesting. I found that I had to, in my double cleanse method, I cleansed 2 times with my cleansing balm before moving on to my regular cleanser, whereas in my normal day life, even with a face of makeup, I just use my cleansing balm once and then I move on to my regular cleanser. And another thing that is common to all of these primers is that once you've applied them and they have set, they leave a slight tacky feeling on the skin. I don't think it's unpleasant at all. None of these feels heavy on the skin, so don't worry about that part. It's just that if you were to go back in and kind of put your fingers on your face where you just have the primer on, there is a little bit of tackiness, which kind of makes sense because that seems to be what grips the foundation to your skin and creates that almost waterproofing type of effect. So those are my thoughts on the new primers from e.l.f. and how they compare to the original. I hope that this was fun and interesting for you and that it helped you out. Please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Of course, share with me any thoughts that you have in the comment section below, or if you had a different experience when using these and testing these. I am also going to be testing out the new Hydrating Camo Concealer from e.l.f. and I'm going to be comparing it to the original, so I will show you side by side kind of how they wear, especially under the eyes, and give you my thoughts on the formula. So if that is of interest to you, make sure you subscribe and you don't miss that video. As always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.